All right. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us and for our new wave panel discussion on digital financial inclusion, particularly focused on rural entrepreneurs. My name is Lisa Schrader, and I am the director of the Mercy Corps AgriFin programs based out of our hub office in Kenya. So I've been based in Kenya for the last 6 years, working with more than 130 organizations across Africa to help them design, test, and scale digital services for smallholder farmers. And the solutions that we've helped to develop here in Africa now are reaching more than 10 million. Actually, I got a new set of numbers today, more than 14 million farmers. So we're quite excited about this environment now in Sub-Saharan Africa, where digital technology can be important in transforming both agriculture and also the landscape for financial inclusion. So our panel today is a really great panel to be diving into the question of financial inclusion and innovation in the area of financial inclusion and how we can use technology to reach rural entrepreneurs and link them to important services. But before I go ahead and have the group introduce themselves, the panelists introduce themselves, I'll go ahead and just quickly present the run of show for this session. So we've got 1 hour for the discussion. And what we're going to do is first kick off with our introductions and a short poll. I've got a little poll for you, and just to kind of get an idea of who's out in the audience. And so the first 15 minutes will include our little poll and introductions. And then we'll go into a discussion session with the panelists around 4 key questions that'll take about the next 30 minutes. And then we'll open up in the last 15 minutes of the session to questions from you. And we'd really love for you to post questions starting at any time in the chat, and I will try to multitask and talk to our panelists, but also identify some good questions coming out from the audience, and we'll take the last 15 minutes to review that. So to go ahead and kick us off, I'm going to try to be really adventurous and ask you a question, a provocative question, and that is: do you think that COVID-19 can help drive breakthrough solutions for Africa, financial inclusion, for rural people? So my question, I'm going ahead and sending this through now, and it's a yes/no question. So I'll hit start poll. Okay, it says please fill in the yes or no. Okay, I think I did. I hope that that's what it says. Please fill in. Okay. All right. I'm trying to use the poll. I'm trying to be creative here. Okay. Drive breakthrough. Okay. All right. Great. Okay, so I've got it up there. So in your poll, basically what I'm asking is, can COVID-19 be used as a oh, we've got 10 votes already. 12, wow. Okay, watching it go. One of the reasons why I asked this question was because I think we saw in Kenya, where I'm based, that the time of kind of election turbulence and violence was actually the time when the M-Pesa mobile money solution had its breakthrough. And there's something about the possibility of breakthrough in a time of crisis where it can happen. So okay, good. So it looks like we have 94% of our audience thinking that can be used to drive breakthroughs. So we've got a good group of technology optimists and a great panel. So I will go ahead and introduce our panel really quickly and ask each of them to talk about how they're working in this sphere of financial inclusion in Sub-Saharan Africa. We have a really great panel group focused on Rwanda, so that's going to be exciting. So what I'll do is I'll first ask Mr. Gordon Kalema, who's the Director General of the National Digital Transformation Programming at the Ministry of ICT and Innovation for Rwanda, one of our keynote speakers. And Gordon, would you mind just going ahead and introducing yourself and your work, particularly related to rural areas, just for 3 or 4 minutes for the group?
Great, thank you, Lisa. First of all, thank you for having me join this conversation. I'm called Gordon Kalema. I work with the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, but I'm the Director General in charge of National Digital Transformation. The ministry at large is in charge of both promoting ICT with a particular focus on innovation, which trickles down to departments. So, for instance, within the Department of Digital Transformation, we care most about driving innovation through promotion of infrastructure, ICT for community development. There is an element of skills, an element of digitization, basically, and then all leading to creation of jobs. At the end of the day, everything that we do should translate into money. Somebody should walk away with something in their pocket. So looking forward to this discussion, and thank you for choosing such a topic, which I believe is one of the most ready and timely conversation to have at post-COVID season. Thank you.
Hello, Lisa. I think you're on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
That was me on mute.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. If I could just ask Christian Kajeri, who is the head of payments for Equity Bank in Rwanda, to go ahead and also introduce himself with a lean into rural areas.
Okay, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for the opportunity given to Equity Bank. I'm the head of payment at Equity Bank with a telecommunication background as an engineer. I'm experiencing and enjoying the financial services sector and digital payment. As Equity Bank, we are solving or answering the challenges faced by rural entrepreneurs in accessing financial services by leveraging or optimizing the opportunity through our agency banking solution, which we introduced 8 years ago. Today, 70% of bank account transactions are done at agency level. 60% are account opening of overall bank are done at agency level. And more than 54% are done in remote rural area. In the same spirit, as a financial service provider, we have ventured in partnership to raise the socioeconomic growth of agribusiness people. We have entered into a partnership with Hingaweze, a USAID-based organization, where we'll be doing a micro-lending, a loan worth 2.5 billion Rwandan francs, which is almost 2.5 or 2.4 million USD. Hingaweze has negotiation partnership with Equity Bank Rwanda PLC for smallholder farmers to access a number of financial services, including the same loan I just mentioned. And the first phase will service more than 40K farmers to financial services access on microfinance and lending programs with the targets to reach more than 70,000 in the 5 years. So we do a lot in rural area. We have placed ourselves as a bank for the people, for socioeconomic growth, and to serve the unbanked in the most remote area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. And we're also, We also are working with equity in Kenya and know how much you guys are pushing the boundaries of digital financial inclusion in rural areas. So it'll be great to have this discussion with you. And last but not least, if I can ask you, Jan, to go ahead and introduce yourself and your work as the founder of MoneyPhone. Looks like you might be on mute. Okay, we still can't hear you, Jan. Is there... I'll go ahead and put myself on mute. Yeah, we've still got a sound issue. Sorry, we're okay. Okay, I don't know, Jan, if maybe you need to just test your microphone, through the speaker site one more time, and we can go ahead and.
How about this?
Bravo, thank you.
I'm so sorry. There's too much equipment on my desk. So great to join you, Lisa. MoneyPhone is a fintech company, and we aim to provide microloans and financial services to people in emerging markets all over Africa, Latin America, and also in the Arab region. So we cooperate closely with Spark, for example, in Rwanda, also with Equity, with Christian, and we're also very active in Jordan, in the MENA region. And it's great to join you here today as an entrepreneur.
Great. I think we've got, a very strong group of experience and very complementary speakers for our panel today. So let's go ahead and dive into the questions. So the first question that I have, what I think I'll do is I'll direct the question to a specific speaker, but then open it up for the other speakers to respond as you would like. So this first speaker, I'll go ahead and direct to Gordon, and that is, from your perspective and where you're sitting, what are the challenges that are faced by rural entrepreneurs in accessing financial services? What are you seeing in your role?
Thank you very much, Lisa, for such a great question. And again, it's great to connect with the rest of the colleagues joining this panel. The challenges are many in my perspective, and one can develop a long list. But what we've seen, especially here in Rwanda and as a ministry that is in charge of promoting ICT to support and enable digital financial inclusion, is mainly, I would break it down into four components. One is around limited skills that we've seen and awareness. Skills in a sense that for many entrepreneurs who start small businesses, most of them come with just technical skills in their domain they've pursued academics from, and end up lacking other complementary skills to build a business. For instance, accounting, skills around taxation, skills around entrepreneurship itself. So what we've been doing, and again, this is not only the ministry, but the whole government, different institutions, is really to be intentional and develop programs that allow to train and upskill people. And then the other thing is around lack of collateral, security guarantees. This is known that most commercial banks do not easily take up the risks to give out money to SMEs. And I'm happy to be joined by a colleague from Equity who's going to be telling us about this. But broadly, this is an issue. And so part of what I'll be talking about maybe in other conversations is actually what could be done around de-risking the business of SMEs and allow them to grow. And then number three, the other overlying issue actually is even around low levels of digitization. So you have a situation where you have SMEs and small enterprises that are fragmented in nature. Most of them conducting their business but not digitized, which comes with challenges to do with cost of doing business, high cost of doing business. But at the same time, their cash flow is sort of invisible. So that way, even the banks that would want to design products that are tailor-made to them would basically have an issue of taking up such a risk because there is no visibility of the cash flow. Again, part of what we are doing as a ministry here, working with the rest of our stakeholders, is to also be sort of intentional and create programs that allows to digitize the enterprises. One example is one that we've been working on for the whole of this year to digitize what we call circles. We have these are banks, these are non-credit lending financial institutions that are pro-development communities. We have about 416 in each sector here we have in Rwanda. And what we did in this year was to really put up a very aggressive program and make sure that they are going digital. So I'm happy even to mention that when the year got to end, where we are now, almost they're running on fully fledged financial platforms that would allow all the transactions to happen. So that's I'll stop there, but I believe that those are like top challenges that we're talking about when we're discussing anything to do with digital financial inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, those are all really important parts, from skills to collateral to levels of digitization, and how we can incorporate kind of the right players on the ground in rural areas into the arena of digital inclusion. Would either one of our other speakers, would Christian or Jan, would you have additional points you'd want to add in on this question of what are the key challenges that are faced by rural entrepreneurs to really be able to access financial services?
Well, sure. I think there's a number. First of all, it's high interest. Rural people still pay 20 to 30%. Second is collateral. Most of the time they don't have any collateral, and if there's collateral, then it basically would threaten their entire life when they lose it. Financial literacy. What am I actually getting as a service? What am I paying for it? I think also risk mitigation. Risk mitigation is nice if you have some assets, if you have some money. If you're a sophisticated investor, definitely there's risk mitigation. But if you're an agricultural farmer, a potato farmer, for example, there is no risk mitigation because you only have potatoes. So these are, for me, the four key issues.
Very good. And Christian, from your perspective at Equity Bank, would you have any other, I mean, that's a pretty big list, but would you have any other points that you want to add to that?
Yeah.
I'll concur with what my colleagues have said, what Gordon has said, and Jan. But just to add on, which most organizations are already doing to solve, but the gap is still high. The first one I'll mention is literacy and understanding the basics of doing business. How to deal with financial institutions. We see a lot of deviation of funds. Also, access to smartphones is still a challenge. Currently, the penetration on Rwanda on feature phone or USSD phone is quite very good. The Ministry of ICT has done a great job. Recently, they introduced a campaign called Smartphone Connect, Don't Connect. Just that COVID came in and kind of delayed, but the journey is extremely well, and the vision is supported by all digital organizations. The other is prediction on harvest accuracy that can be done by telco RF antennas or using satellites to get accurate data on the productivity. This is something that most organizations should do. It's still a challenge because the lack of accuracy of data on harvest pushes insurance company to give a very high premium rate. despite of the value chain crop productivity. So this is what I can add on, but Yana and Gordon had already mentioned all the long list. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really comprehensive range of observations to get us kickstarted in this discussion. So I'll go ahead and give the next question off to Jan, if you don't mind, and then let the other panelists dive in. The next question is, what's the status of digital access to finance in Rwanda and Sub-Saharan Africa? And what do you think can be done to really increase the outreach of digital agricultural services, particularly in rural areas?
The status is that it's thriving. I think there's a lot happening at the moment. It's fascinating because over the past 20 years, we've seen a number of developments. First, I think much more people know how to read and write, which is very important if you want to use digital access to finance. Then secondly, telecom kicked in, USSD kicked in, as Christian said, and now we see smartphones coming in, which basically will enable anybody anywhere to access digital financial services. Obviously, we still need Elon Musk to complete his satellite network in the skies to really get cheap access to internet anywhere in Rwanda, for example. But still, there's great coverage by the networks, so people can access digital finance. Now, what we currently see, and I think Gordon was making a reference to that, is that there's a huge push, especially now COVID-19 hit, towards digitalization of services. And this is a very exciting time to be working in that field. So if you ask me what's the status, I'd say it's thriving. Obviously, there's also many challenges, but for now, I'd like to be on the optimistic side to kick off.
Yeah, I think I would concur on that. In that before COVID, my program and all of our partners were reaching around 4 million farmers, and then today we're reaching 14 million farmers, and I think that's because with the lack of mobility, the lack of information, unstable markets, it's a time of real behavior change, of looking to new tools and new systems to answer those questions and really make the big decisions that farmers need to make right now, and all kinds of rural businesses, agribusinesses, but any kind of businesses being hit by COVID. So just putting it out there for you, Gordon, and for you, Christian, would you have other perspectives on the status of digital access to financial services in Rwanda, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and for rural people and rural entrepreneurs?
Gordon, do you want to go first? Okay.
I like it when both jump in at the same time. Okay, so Gordon, why don't you go first?
All right, thank you. I'll just add a few perspectives. And I'm going to allude to what my colleague just mentioned. I think something that Christian mentioned earlier, to do with the role of SMEs that we have today. One would mention that there is a great progress that we've seen over time. From way back when you count, let's say, 10 years back, I was looking at the numbers very quickly, where it says this has been a report where the financial inclusion had to grow from just 48%, that is in 2008, to something around 89%, which represents about 5.2 million adult population included. That speaks a lot. And when you look at the market here in Africa, where I think I was also looking at one of the reports from IFC Capital, which estimated the SMEs here in Africa to be, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, to be around 3,301 billion. 331 billion. That's really great. That's a lot. And so this is not different from where we are in Rwanda, and we equally see the great potential that comes with being intentional to promote and put up programs and support SMEs to grow. But what I would mention in particular is that I think what we're doing here, we are sort of at the right path. I would say what needs to be done is simply to keep the focus and momentum. You have a situation where you have different institutions in charge of different mandates putting up, basically doing their job. For instance, you have a strong role of the regulator, that's BNR, the National Bank, that is trying to put up agile policies and regulations. For instance, I know there is one that was put in place, the regulation for non-credit financing schemes. This is a regulation which was put in place specifically to allow and basically allow a framework to promote the non-credit financing institutions, which take up most of the risks. And then number two, there is also a national financing inclusion strategy that is under implementation already, which builds also on Rwanda financial interoperability policy. So all these policies, strategies, regulations come basically to set the industry straight. And so but again, it's one thing to have the policy, but it's a different thing when you're making the right interventions, basically to implement the policy. And that's why I think part of what I would mention on my side as I conclude on this is even around taking an approach of a multi-sectoral adoption or integration of these programs. So basically, how do we make sure, and I think this is what we're doing, we're trying to make sure that the conversation, the challenge around financial inclusion is mainstreamed into the works of what everyone else is doing. And then that way, you have a shared responsibility across the entire ecosystem. You have the institutions taking up the responsibility, different institutions, the banks, the commercial banks, the non-commercial banks, other organizations trying to reorganize the SMEs into cooperatives, because the more you organize them, the more basically you're creating value for them. The more you organize them, the more you basically converge to allow them gain a more greater capital portfolio, which allows them to take up loans. So there are so many things that are being done across the sectors, and if you do the tracing, you find that actually across all different institutions, there are different people doing something. And lastly, I think for me, I believe that for such a challenge like this, you're not going to get one size fits all solution. Rather, you need to take a multi-sectoral approach whereby anything done contributes to the broader vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think those are all really important points about, using more agile and flexible regulation, and helping to drive lower cost internet, and keeping up the momentum, and kind of doing, continuing to move forward and create a status quo of inclusion. Christian, is there anything else you'd want to add, particularly on the second half of the question, which is how to really increase the outreach of digital of digital financial services in rural areas?
Thank you so much. I also want to answer a very good question from Isabella after answering the second half of the question, if you allow, Lisa.
I was going to save that to the end. I was going to save that to the end, but go ahead. It is a good question from Isabella.
A very good question. I loved it. So Equity is doing it by expanding our network digital access and availing digital services on USSD, because currently KYC in Rwanda is more than 90%. By KYC, I mean people who have access on national ID, adults, that would allow them to open an account in the formal or financial sector. Recently, we have requested to even open a junior account for people below 16 or 18 years old that still want to do where they have a guardian or their own parents to access finance or to create a saving account. On a more detailed plan, we have started even before COVID to digitalize fully the bank. That means access to our channels of all banking services, cash in, cash out, savings, or even micro loans. Today, you are able to get a loan in 1 or even 30 seconds by just dialing a USSD code. So at this level, and that is only for salaried people, the plan is to cascade it to smallholder farmers. To answer the question of Isabella, Equity has entered a partnership with Hingaweze. I think I mentioned it when we are starting, which is a civil society in Rwanda, and we have agreed to offer a loan worth 2.5 million USD. By the end of the project, over 600 new acres of farmland will be fitted with new irrigation infrastructure. And again, according to the memorandum of understanding that we signed with Hingaweze, which is a USAID project, we have pledged to facilitate 5,000 farmers to access credit with a value of up to 500 million Rwandan francs, which is almost 500,000 USD, while 25 farmer cooperatives will access 300 million loan of value. This is just one example. In the same parallel, we are talking with Spark Rwanda, which is another civil society organization. Spark Vision in Rwanda is to create, or they aim at creating 2,000 off-farm jobs annually for mostly youth. And what they're trying to change is more of a mindset change from subsistence farming to agribusiness, a growth-oriented agribusiness entrepreneurs. And we have signed an MOU, and where we are going to leverage on the technology of Money Fund, as Jan mentioned. These are kind of initiatives that we are doing for creating access to finance to the most remote people, digital to finance, and nano loans, very small nano loans, so that people, when they're doing harvest, they are able to purchase bed sheets, to buy fertilizers, and we are doing it in a way that is scoped in a whole ecosystem with the input fertilizers or the whole supply chain or the supply chain, and the money is not deviated. We are also in talk. We are also in talk with one of the organization that can do accurate prediction, 99% on the harvest, so that we can get a lower premium insurance. Those are few initiatives to mention for time's sake, but we are very excited for the journey. And thanks for the question, Lisa.
Great. Yeah, that's really great. And I think it feeds well into our third question for the panel that I'll direct again to Gordon initially, and then invite the rest of the panel to speak to. Gordon, what is the role of government? And also, actually kind of to Isabella's question, the role of NGOs and the private sector to enable and support the ecosystem to really move financing to SMEs, MSMEs, et cetera, in rural areas.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alyssa. I'll try to be sort of brief on this. And again, I will speak as somebody who works within government, as a policymaker. You always want to be broad. Now, the government will always have several things to do, but not alone. There is always an opportunity working with different stakeholders, private sector, NGOs, and there is always a meeting point. I'm happy to touch base with Isabella and see what partnership could come out of this. But I would mention a few things that the government could do, which we are even doing. First of all, the one that I talked about more briefly, which I don't want to give more details, is around putting up policies and regulations. Now, this is very important, but just the borderline is actually having a policy or regulations or standards that are sort of agile in nature. So how do you basically create and develop tailor-made policies? Because the one size fits all will not work for you if you're to target different levels of SMEs. You have people within the communities, not necessarily tech. You have entrepreneurs coming from different sectors, agriculture, education, technology, and so on. So how do you map out their needs and create policies that recreates products that allows them to grow basically? So that agility component is very, very important. And I want to believe this is where I think most of the African countries have been failing. And then number two, which I also broadly mentioned, taking a holistic approach to make sure that you have everyone doing their homework. So it's a national challenge. For instance, here in Rwanda, I know NST1, which is a national strategy for transformation by 2024, we should be able to create about 2.5 million jobs. So how do we achieve that? So that is a target which is usually shared across sectors, and everyone takes the homework. I know, for instance, within the sector of ICT, we have two homeworks. One is to contribute and create 100,000, but also be able to enable other sectors achieve their objective as well. So the approach of multi-sectoral is very important because you're not going to have one solution that's going to give you all the answers. The other example that I would mention is, and again, just to give an example on being multi-sectoral, yeah, you have a strong contribution of the commercial banks, the likes of Equity here, and the rest of others. Be intentional to take up risky businesses. For instance, if you talk about tech, the tech businesses are known to have greater return on investment when they succeed. But how do you bet your money to make sure that you're targeting your greater return on investment? So we have to be intentional. Then number two, even the role of non-financial institutions, like we said, you have the ministries taking up responsibilities. I know, for instance, here in Rwanda, the Minister of Culture and Youth, which is in charge of the youth, they have many several programs around providing the youth with startup toolkits. And when I say startup toolkits, basically it's about a package of startup investment in terms of finances. But sometimes they even give actual materials to sort of start with. We have NILDA and a couple of them, even development partners. They have come on board to work with government and design models. There are so many examples, mindful of time that would go, but the key message around this actually is to make sure that everyone takes a share. And then the other one is around being able to reorganize and merge the SMEs, which I mentioned earlier. For instance, here, I'll give an example. We have the cooperatives here in Rwanda, so many of them. If I think by number, we have about 500,000 cooperatives that have got members up to 5 million people. So, but below the cooperatives, you have what they call VLSs, the Village Saving and Lending Groups. These are just community-based lending groups. People come together and then they start sort of an association that lends money. So what we've been doing, for instance, and by the way, these ones have got about already 1 million memberships across the country. So what we've been doing is to make sure that these are hoped to get organized, get the legal status, and then enforce some sort of a governance framework. So the more they get organized, the more they are able to run their financials in a more effective way, and the more they earn a credit score that allows them to visit, let's say, Equity and get a loan. So those are the things that could be done. And then lastly, the second last story that I would talk about is around digitization. Now, this is very important, and there is a lot that we're doing here, but I believe that countries here, especially in Africa or globally, this is one secret, because the more you have all these SMEs and enterprises digitized, the more basically you're creating visibility of their cash flow, which allows them, like I said, to earn credit scores. So But again, you want always digital. When you talk about tech, you need to achieve one, interoperability, but at the same time, even get to train them digitally. So when you've been able to mainstream the digital inclusion into the operations of SMEs, you cut a lot of costs. And when you do that, you then allow flexibility and visibility to collaborate with the rest of other financial institutions. And then lastly, the one that is very important is around creating sort of packages that are not necessarily have to do with getting loans from the banks. For instance, there has to be, and this is one thing we are doing here, creating what one would call early stage and risky capital financing. Basically, you create funds that is going to finance these SMEs throughout the value chain, from the ideation level to early stage until you get to venture capitalists when the company is ready for a venture capital investment. And for you to do that, sometimes you're not looking at necessarily finances that are going to be coming from commercial banks because of the risk issues we've been discussing, but maybe you're looking at something to do with grants, quasi equity, procurement for innovation, equity capital, things that are tailor-made for a nature of a startup, a startup enterprise. And then when you do that, then you're able to start running some programs. For instance, there is one that we are doing already with the Ministry of Agriculture, because agriculture employs many people, and you have lots of SMEs starting their businesses from agriculture. So one thing that the government has been doing since last year is to do a pilot around insurance and de-risking the agriculture business. So, for instance, the government pays 40% of the premium that ensures farmers and cattle keepers. So this product has attracted a lot of attention and helped many farmers basically take up risks. But then still, it has also opened lots of windows for other commercial and financing institutions to come in, because now they start seeing that agriculture business is less risky the more you have insurance. But the challenge before was that who starts the drive, who sits in the drive seat. So this is where the government had to come in and say, okay, we're going to give you money, we pay for you 40%, and take up these risks. And so I was looking at the numbers, lots of subscribers. That is one example.
Hello?
Talks about,
I think we lost Gordon. Gordon, are you still there?
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't know where I...
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't know where I got cut from. I don't know if anyone else was able to hear me, but I was actually at the end. Lisa, were you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Gordon. I think you'll have to repeat.
Okay. Just to make sure that Lisa, were you able to hear me?
Yeah, so sorry. I dropped off. Where are we? We can. I assume you guys have answered that question thoroughly.
Yeah, I was basically wrapping up the question. And,
hello, Gordon.
Yes, Christian. Hello.
Okay,
Christian?
it sounds like we're back online. Okay, it sounds like we're back online. I wanted to follow up with your response, Gordon, if I could, with sending the same question to Jan, because Jan himself is an entrepreneur, and so the question. Sorry, the question is to Jan, where you see the role of tech innovators in pushing this ecosystem forward.
I'd like to add something to the discussion. I think one of the main challenges for most people in emerging markets right now, and farmers in emerging markets definitely amongst them, is the high interest rates people have to pay. Moneyphone is based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and we operate, as I said, in several African and Middle Eastern and countries in Latin America. And all over the world, if you talk about microfinance, which most of the time, when you're not still at the agribusiness level, what you're talking about is 20 to 30%. Now, in Amsterdam, if you're a bank, you go to the central bank, you have to pay like 0.5%. So in between the central bank of Europe and the people receiving the money, the farmers in Rwanda, there's 20 to 30% of interest that people pay on an annual basis. Now, this is a value chain that can definitely be integrated by tech. And what I mean by that is that currently, for example, banks base here,
your voice is breaking.
My voice is breaking.
I can hear you just fine. I think just maybe just try to carry on. I think our internet's not strong enough to carry the call real well, but I can hear you well.
Okay, so what I mean is that if you talk about financing, obviously there's SACCOs and MFIs in Rwanda, for example, that are financed for 60-70% by local funds. But there's still a lot of foreign investors that invest in MFIs, and they ask, for example, the Dutch bank Rabobank, they ask like 10%. So they go, Rabobank and other Dutch banks and other Western European banks, they go to the central bank, they get their money for 0 to 1%, then they go to Rwanda, they make transaction costs, and the price is 10%. In northern Rwanda, for example, I know this is a fact. Then the MFI in northern Rwanda goes to the farmer, and they have to add another 10 to 15% because of the transaction costs. This is mainly because of due diligence, compliance, KYC, people flying back and forth pre-COVID, but even during COVID, and also just people sitting down at a desk and talking with each other. ICT, internet, technology can really make this whole value chain much more transparent, and this will mean that transaction costs will go down tremendously. We've seen microfinance loans going down in price over the past decades. But I'm pretty sure that over the next 10 to 15 years, they will go down much faster by integrating that value chain all the way from Western European banks and other banks and wealthy investors in Africa and in the Middle East down to the farmers that really need the money. So this is where technology can play a huge role in really improving their lives, because if they don't have to pay 20 to 30%, they can keep that 20 to 30%, put them in savings, make investments, build up a pension, or educate their children.
Thanks very much. I think that we're definitely seeing the possibility for technology to lower costs of delivery, and partnerships is a big way to do that. I wondered whether Christian had anything he'd like to add to this as well. So this general question about what is the role of the private sector in enabling and supporting ecosystem and financial inclusion, which I know is a big part of the mission of equity. And there was a big question. I think there's a good question from the group about how equity builds human capital, to really make things work for rural entrepreneurs. I think that Christian might be having the same type of internet ghosts that I was having. Christian, we can't hear you. Might you be on mute? Okay, sorry for the internet here. While we're waiting for Christian to get back online, I know we've got about 10 minutes left in the conversation because of the delays. Let me go ahead and ask our last question, which I think is a really good one. And anyone can jump in on this who would like. What is the elephant in the room regarding digital inclusive finance, particularly for rural areas. And we've talked about a lot of elephants in the room already, whether that's the high cost of lending, or the skills gaps. But what would you guys say are the clear? We've talked about COVID. What are the clear elephants in the room related to digital inclusion? What do we really need to be focusing on now to make this work for rural people? Who would like to take that one first?
I can go for it.
Go for it.
Thank you. Two things that I would mention that I've seen here being an issue, well, not only here, but even globally. I think there is one around being able to fix the fragmentation nature of SMEs. I believe this is a very important ingredient and a very good start with enabler. When you're able to bring together and break the fragmentation nature of SMEs, build structures for them, governance component of it, get them to upskill, then you're basically building greater capabilities that's going to allow them to attract more financing from many local, even global financing organizations. So this is what we are doing, and as I mentioned, starting from the grassroots, being able to organize those that voluntarily start themselves from the household level, and then keep them growing into cooperatives eventually. The other thing that I also believe is a challenge is actually agility. Again, being able to apply agile policies, regulations, and standards. I've seen, for instance, here there are so many companies that come to establish footprints here in Rwanda. But one thing has been that when you, let's say, go into a country or when you're entering a new market, usually there are those historical business service level agreements, standards, business operating procedures that you've developed from another market. Now, one mistake that most people do is to carry along and try to transpose the same principles or same business rules to apply in every market. That has failed many SMEs. Mm-hmm. And I think I just mentioned it because I saw one question that was directed to, I think, Jan from one of the participants here around the challenge they had when they established some examples that he mentioned around equity and others. So that has been the issue, because we've seen even so many other SMEs grow and actually succeeding, yet others are struggling. So I feel like whether it has to do with policies or standards or even by just business rules of the companies themselves, there is nothing that is standard. Everything has to be responding to circumstances, to the market size, to the incentives that are on ground, and then try to adapt. But I want to believe, but I know for sure most companies are failing because they've been trying to apply the previous rules and historical standards to the new markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we can see some questions coming in the chat that kind of relate to this elephant in the room. And so I don't see Christian on the line now, but maybe Jan, if you wouldn't mind, there's some questions here around the points of agility that Gordon just raised. Is there a role for cryptocurrency? And then another elephant in the room, which is why is farmer uptake so low of these solutions? And then we've got a couple of questions here around the challenges of KYC. Are these things that you could respond to?
And I was losing you every now and then, but I think I got your question. There's obviously a lot to figure out at the moment. I think farmers are not on the forefront of the digital revolution, which is very logical, because they don't live in the cities. They don't use internet by nature, because they're young, educated students wanting to do like an internet enterprise or whatever, or an agribusiness because you did an MBA somewhere. They are farmers, and they're busy growing potatoes or corn or whatever the produce is that they're growing. So it's not the first group that you would expect to do business in a digital way. Then also, obviously, most of the time, a lot of farmers are still illiterate, and they're not very rich, so they don't have the money to buy the right tools. So it's obvious that farmers are a very tough group to tackle, and at the same time, they're very important because they provide the food that other people live off, and they also obviously they're the larger part of the population in most sub-Saharan African countries. So we'll have to figure things out as we go along the way, and it will not be easy. And there's obviously a lot of failures in the past, but there's also a clear path of success. And there's certain companies in Africa, internet companies providing financial services, that have been tremendously successful. I don't have to point them out to you because you know all of them, and we really have to continue collaborating together. And I think one of the great examples of the Rwandan cooperation is that Equity, Spark, and Moneyphone cooperate together. So this is an NGO, it's a major East African bank, and a Dutch fintech corporation operating together and trying to figure things out as we go along. It's a very interesting moment in time to be here, and I'm pretty sure that things will look very different in 5 years' time for the farmers and also for the companies and NGOs involved.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jan. I know that we've got 2 minutes left, so maybe I'll just ask one lightning question. And if you could give me just a sentence. Someone in the chat had said, still in Rwanda and across Sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of farmers, a lot of people in rural areas don't have trust for their money on their phone. And what do you think are just really briefly one or two things that we could be doing to build trust so that people in rural areas will use digital financial services? Maybe I'll start with you, Gordon. And Christian, I don't know if you're on the line, but would love to hear just one sentence, two sentences before we run out of time.
Yeah, I think for me,
Gordon?
Thanks a lot. I think for me, this has to do with continuously conducting awareness, but most importantly, through the regulator, try to enforce a good level of security SLAs. People become uncomfortable when they have past experiences or they hear about cyber threats and basically scams where their money is lost. People don't become uncomfortable for no good reason. There is always a good reason. So for us to be able, and this is what we're doing already, our regulator, for us to be able to create and bring in a good level of confidence into people to use digital wallets is only when we've tried as much as possible to reduce the cyber threats and their best practices. It comes with infrastructure, it comes with investment, it comes with being intentional and running programs. So that's why, for instance, of late you've heard that here in Rwanda, we've created a new institution called Rwanda Cybersecurity Authority, and their first homework actually is to fix this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great, I think, trust and execution are great ways to end this. And I want to thank the panelists. We're out of time now and so appreciate your insights in this session. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Christian. And to all of our great questions from the audience, it's been a super conversation. And we look forward to next phases of discussion and interaction with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, Lisa, are you still there?